There's a strange electricity in the air, isn't there? A heaviness you can't explain, a pulse beneath your skin that feels like both a warning and a promise. Something is coming. Something you can feel before you can name. And whether you realize it or not, this Sunday is the moment everything shifts, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Because for twin flames, this isn't just another day on the calendar. This is a checkpoint written into your soul contract long before you arrived here. The energy is tightening, rising, rearranging itself around you. Memories resurfacing out of nowhere, emotions intensifying without reason, dreams that feel too vivid to ignore. These aren't coincidences. They're signals. Messages. Alignments. The universe is preparing to test the feminine, not to punish her, but to reveal the truth of who she has become. This is the moment where old wounds echo one last time and the new version of her is asked to stand firm. The moment where her peace is measured, her intuition sharpened, and her heart anchored deeper than ever before. What happens this Sunday will not be loud, but it will be undeniable. Not a reunion, but a revelation. Not an ending, but a threshold. So breathe. Stay with me. Because in the next moments, you're going to understand why this portal matters. Why the feminine is being tested. And why this Sunday holds the exact frequency that could change everything. As the feminine steps into a more stabilized vibration, a profound portal of divine timing begins to open around her. What once felt slow, stagnant, or uncertain suddenly starts to move with unusual clarity and momentum. This isn't coincidence, it is the natural result of her inner frequency aligning with her higher path. When the feminine anchors into her truth, trusting her intuition and releasing the need to chase outcomes, time itself begins to shift. Timelines accelerate not because she forces movement, but because her energy finally matches what she has long been destined to receive. This is the spiritual law of resonance in motion. When the inner world aligns, the outer world responds. What she once perceived as delays now reveal themselves as divine orchestration. Every pause, every silence, every moment of waiting that felt like abandonment or uncertainty was actually preparation. The universe was rearranging circumstances, clearing what was misaligned, and strengthening her foundation so she could hold what she prayed for. The feminine often learns patience through discomfort, because her heart moves quickly while divine timing moves with precision. But now, as her inner stability deepens, she begins to understand why nothing could have unfolded sooner. Not because she wasn't worthy, but because she wasn't ready, not in the way her soul required. These realizations soften her heart, turning frustration into gratitude, and confusion into clarity. In this transition, synchronicities begin to multiply around her like cosmic breadcrumbs. Repeated numbers, vivid dreams, symbolic signs, unexpected messages. These are not illusions or hopeful projections. They are confirmations from the universe that alignment is in motion. Synchronicities appear when two timelines, the spiritual and the physical, begin to merge. They tell her, "Keep going. You're in the flow now." These signs are not meant to give instant answers but to remind her that she is walking the right path, guided by forces far greater than she can see. Her intuition sharpens, her awareness expands, and she starts noticing patterns that were once invisible. The universe speaks louder when she is capable of listening. As Sunday approaches, the energy grows stronger, almost palpable. This particular day marks the merging of destiny and readiness, two forces that rarely meet at the same time unless there has been deep internal transformation. Destiny alone is not enough. The soul must be prepared to embrace it. Readiness without destiny leads nowhere. Destiny without readiness creates chaos. But when both align, a portal opens, and life begins to rearrange itself around the feminine's vibration. This Sunday becomes a symbolic gateway, a moment when divine timing meets her inner evolution. The shift may not be dramatic or loud, it may come through stillness, a realization, a message, or a subtle inner knowing. But she will feel it. The air will be different, her heart will be steadier, and her energy will move with purpose rather than longing. This is the beginning of a new timeline, one she no longer waits for, but steps into with certainty. For as her vibration rises, destiny can finally recognize her. And when the two meet, everything begins to unfold with divine precision. There comes a moment in the feminine's spiritual evolution when emotional sovereignty rises from within her, not as a skill she practices, but as a natural state of being. This is the point where she stops absorbing the energy of everyone around her and begins standing rooted in her own essence. For so long, the feminine has carried emotions that were not hers, taken responsibility for the healing of others, and internalized the weight of energies she was never meant to hold. But as she awakens, she realizes that empathy is not the same as absorption, and compassion does not require self-abandonment. Emotional sovereignty becomes her superpower the moment she understands that she can feel deeply without losing herself in what she feels. With this shift, she begins responding to life from her own centered truth instead of reacting to external triggers. Her emotions stop being a battlefield and become a compass. Instead of being knocked off balance by other people's moods, silence, or distances, she chooses her responses consciously. She no longer reaches outward for reassurance because she has discovered the quiet authority of her own inner voice. Her truth stabilizes her, even when the world around her feels chaotic. This new centeredness allows her to observe what is happening without becoming overwhelmed by it. She listens to her intuition, not her fears, and moves with an energy that is deliberate, grounded, and wise. This is the birth of emotional mastery, the moment she shifts from reacting to commanding her own vibration. As she strengthens her emotional boundaries, her magnetism grows effortlessly. Boundaries are not walls, they are signals of self-respect, clarity, and energetic sovereignty. The feminine who honors her emotional limits becomes more powerful, not less approachable. Her presence becomes unmistakably magnetic because she no longer depletes herself trying to be everything for everyone. She allows in what resonates and quietly releases what does not. Others feel this shift even before she speaks. Her energy becomes clearer, cleaner, and more aligned. She begins to attract people, opportunities, and connections that honor her value rather than drain her spirit. Her aura strengthens because her boundaries are no longer negotiable. And the masculine, especially, feels the difference. Her calm becomes compelling, her silence becomes sacred, and her energy becomes impossible to ignore. This entire transformation leads her into the final stage, shifting from reaction to energetic command. Reaction is fear-based, tied to old wounds and insecurities. Command is soul-based, rooted in awareness and inner strength. When she operates from energetic command, she no longer tries to control what happens, she controls her frequency, knowing reality arranges itself around vibration. She realizes she doesn't need to chase, explain, or persuade anything into alignment. Her energy communicates more clearly than her words ever could. She becomes the one who sets the tone, not the one who adjusts to the emotional climate around her. This is true sovereignty, the power to shape her experience from within. Emotional sovereignty doesn't make the feminine harder, it makes her unstoppable. She becomes a woman who feels deeply, loves fully, but remains unshaken. Her energy becomes her anchor. Her boundaries become her protection. Her truth becomes her guide. And her presence becomes her power. There is a sacred stage in the feminine's awakening where the universe gently, yet unmistakably, brings forward the final layers of the wounded feminine. These layers do not rise to punish her or pull her backward, they rise because she is finally strong enough to release them completely. Old emotions, patterns, and memories may surface unexpectedly, but they are not signs of regression. They are signs of purification. The soul knows what must be cleared before she can step fully into her divine feminine embodiment. These patterns are not asking to be lived again. They are asking to be acknowledged, honored, and released. When she understands this, she stops fearing her emotional waves and begins greeting them as the last remnants of a past that no longer defines her. Within this phase, she begins healing the deepest wounds of the feminine: abandonment, unworthiness, and overgiving. These wounds were formed long before her current relationships, shaped by generational patterns, cultural expectations, and earlier heartbreaks. The wounded feminine believed she had to earn love through sacrifice, prove her value through effort, or hold space for others even when no one held space for her. But now, the higher feminine within her rises with clarity. She realizes she was never abandoned by love, she was abandoned by those who were not capable of receiving it. She learns that unworthiness was never her truth, it was a false belief inherited from pain. And she recognizes that overgiving was not love, it was survival. As she heals, she finally understands that she deserves reciprocity, depth, and emotional integrity. Her heart softens, not because she is fragile, but because she is free. This healing allows her to rewrite her inner story of love. Instead of seeing love as something she must chase, perform for, or cling to, she begins to view love as something she embodies. She no longer measures her worth by how others respond to her. She measures it by how deeply she honors herself. Her inner dialogue shifts from, "Am I enough?" to, "I am already whole." From, "Why didn't they choose me?" to, "I choose myself." From, "I must hold this together," to, "What aligns will stay effortlessly." This rewriting is not intellectual, it is energetic. The stories she once told herself lose their emotional charge. The patterns she once repeated no longer feel natural. She steps into a new relationship with love, one where she receives without guilt and gives without depletion. One where love becomes an expansion, not a sacrifice. As she sheds the wounded feminine, she becomes a vessel for conscious connection. Her heart opens again, but this time with discernment. She attracts relationships rooted in authenticity, mutual growth, and emotional responsibility. She stops settling for connections that drain her and begins attracting those that meet her. The love she is now prepared for is not chaotic or confusing, it is grounded, aware, and reciprocal. She becomes a partner, not a healer, a reflection, not a rescuer. Her presence alone inspires emotional truth in others. This is the feminine rising into her sacred power, soft yet strong, open yet protected, loving yet sovereign. In releasing the wounded feminine, she steps into the highest expression of herself, ready to experience love from a place of wholeness rather than longing. There comes a moment in the masculine's spiritual journey when avoidance no longer protects him, distractions no longer soothe him, and silence no longer hides what his soul has been urging him to confront. This is the beginning of true accountability, the point where the masculine realizes that everything he once ran from has been waiting quietly within him, asking to be acknowledged. The feminine's evolution, her rising stability, and her unwavering inner peace act as a mirror that he can no longer look away from. Through this reflection, he begins to see the places where he avoided truth, where fear disguised itself as logic, and where emotional distance felt safer than vulnerability. His soul is no longer willing to let him bypass these truths, because his awakening requires honesty, not hiding. As these realizations surface, the masculine begins confronting emotional karma he has long postponed. Every unspoken feeling, every ignored intuition, every pattern of withdrawal now returns, not as punishment, but as a call to evolution. The emotional weight he once believed he could outrun begins to sit heavily on his chest, asking to be addressed. He feels the consequences of choosing safety over depth, logic over heart, and avoidance over connection. The universe is not shaming him, it is guiding him. It is bringing forward unresolved emotions, past wounds, and old fears because his soul is finally ready to process them. For the first time, he understands that accountability is not suffering, it is liberation. It is the doorway through which he can step into the man he was always meant to become. This inner push leads him toward a profound shift, feeling called toward alignment rather than comfort. The masculine realizes that comfort has kept him stagnant, repeating cycles that no longer fit the man he is becoming. The old ways of numbing, distracting, or detaching begin to lose their appeal. What once felt easy now feels empty. What once soothed now suffocates. His spirit wants alignment, truth, presence, emotional depth, and an authentic connection to himself and others. This desire doesn't come from pressure, it comes from awakening. He begins to sense the difference between temporary relief and true peace. The path of alignment may feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable, but it feels real. It feels purposeful. It feels alive. Much of this transformation is activated by the feminine stability. Her evolution acts as the catalyst for his awakening. Not because she tries to fix him or pull him forward, but because she no longer absorbs his chaos. Her grounded energy, her sovereignty, and her emotional clarity create a vibration that his soul recognizes as truth. When she stops overgiving, he begins to feel the weight of his own patterns. When she holds boundaries, he learns the value of emotional responsibility. When she embodies peace, he sees his own unrest. The feminine doesn't awaken him through pressure, she awakens him through presence. Her alignment becomes the invitation for him to rise into his own. In this stage, the masculine is not falling apart, he is falling into himself. He is learning to meet his emotions rather than escape them. He is learning to own his choices, honor his truth, and show up with sincerity instead of fear. Accountability becomes his turning point, his moment of reclaiming his power. And through this awakening, he becomes not only a stronger man, but a conscious counterpart capable of meeting the feminine with clarity, integrity, and heart. There is a moment in every divinely orchestrated connection when the universal law of resonance becomes unmistakably active, when energy speaks louder than words, actions, or silence. At the soul level, like attracts like, not through desire or longing, but through vibration. Souls are drawn to the frequency they recognize, the frequency that mirrors their truth, the frequency they are destined to evolve with. No matter how much physical distance or emotional confusion exists on the surface, resonance quietly governs the connection beneath it all. It arranges synchronicities, stirs intuition, and pulls two energies toward each other when the time is right. This law cannot be forced, manipulated, or bypassed. It can only respond to the vibration each soul emits. And now, as the feminine rises into a higher frequency, the connection begins to shift in response. The feminine's frequency shift becomes a catalyst for reshaping the masculine's path. As she steps deeper into her sovereignty, her emotional stability, and her alignment with her higher self, her energy no longer chases, clings, or compensates. This shift creates an unmistakable ripple into the masculine's field. Her evolution calls his truth forward. Her light illuminates the shadows he once avoided. Her inner peace exposes the inner chaos he has tried to silence. What once triggered him now awakens him. Her new vibration becomes a mirror reflecting who he could be, not through pressure, but through possibility. This is the power of resonance. The feminine does not force the masculine to rise. She inspires him to do so simply by embodying her own transformation. As both energies begin to elevate, vibrational harmony starts forming between them. This harmony is not about being identical, it is about being aligned. Both the masculine and feminine begin resonating at frequencies of healing, growth, truth, and emotional awakening. Their energies start moving in the same direction, even if their journeys are different. Where there was once emotional distance, there is now energetic closeness. Where there was fear, there is now curiosity. Where there was resistance, there is now surrender. Vibrational harmony doesn't require physical contact. It happens in the unseen, the space where souls communicate far beyond words. They begin meeting each other at the level of truth, rather than meeting through wounds, fears, or patterns. This harmony begins quietly, gently, and then suddenly, the connection feels different, lighter, clearer, alive. As resonance strengthens, what was once blocked now begins to open. The emotional walls the masculine builds start to soften. The doubts the feminine carried begin to dissolve. Situations that once felt stuck begin to move. Communication that seemed impossible becomes suddenly probable. Opportunities for alignment appear without being forced. The universe starts rearranging circumstances to reflect the new vibration both souls hold. What once felt delayed now feels divinely timed. What once felt like separation now feels like preparation. Energy flows more freely, not because one soul chased the other, but because both souls rose to meet each other in truth. The universal law of resonance does not operate through effort, it operates through alignment. When two souls elevate their vibration, the connection naturally follows. Nothing external creates this shift, it is born from within. And now, as resonance activates between the masculine and feminine, their connection begins to move into its next phase, one guided not by fear or longing, but by the highest frequency they are capable of embodying. As the feminine rises into deeper spiritual embodiment, her heart begins to transform into a powerful conduit for higher guidance. This is not a metaphor, it is an energetic truth. When the feminine softens into presence, releases old emotional burdens, and aligns with her authentic self, her intuition sharpens to a clarity that borders on the psychic. She starts sensing shifts before they occur, feeling truth before it is spoken, and recognizing energy before it becomes visible. Her intuition no longer whispers, it speaks with unmistakable resonance. Decisions that once required overthinking now unfold effortlessly through inner knowing. The more she trusts this intuitive voice, the more accurate and instantaneous it becomes, guiding her toward what serves her path and away from what drains her spirit. This awakening brings with it a profound sensitivity to messages delivered through sensation, symbolism, and dreams. The universe begins communicating with her in the language of energy, goosebumps that confirm alignment, heaviness that warns of misalignment, vivid dreams carrying messages her conscious mind is not yet ready to process. She notices patterns, synchronicities, repeated numbers, feathers, songs, or phrases that seem to appear precisely when she needs reassurance or direction. These signs are not coincidences. They are responses to her openness. The feminine has always been the intuitive force of the spiritual connection, but now that her heart is clear, the messages come faster, louder, and more consistently. Each sensation becomes a compass, each symbol a doorway, each dream a revelation. As her sensitivity expands, her emotional intelligence evolves into spiritual wisdom. She no longer judges her emotions as burdens or weaknesses. Instead, she understands them as sacred signals from her soul. Fear becomes a teacher rather than a threat. Sadness becomes a release rather than a collapse. Joy becomes a confirmation rather than a fleeting moment. Through emotion, she reads energy, within herself, within others, and within the connection. She gains the ability to interpret her inner world with remarkable precision, recognizing when something is hers to hold and when something is meant to be released. The emotional chaos she once feared becomes a source of strength, clarity, and inner authority. This transformation leads to a powerful shift. Her heart begins leading her mind into alignment. Instead of the mind controlling her direction through fear, logic, or past conditioning, her heart guides the mind into truth, peace, and expansion. The mind becomes a tool, not a master. Decisions flow from intuition, and the mind simply organizes them. She no longer seeks external validation because her inner guidance system is fully activated. She stops doubting herself because her heart speaks with conviction. She moves with grace, confidence, and clarity because her heart knows the path long before her mind can understand it. When the feminine's heart becomes a conduit for higher guidance, she steps into the deepest form of spiritual sovereignty. She lives from intuition, moves from alignment, and speaks from truth. Her presence becomes healing, her energy becomes magnetic, and her path becomes illuminated. In this state, she no longer walks alone, she walks guided, supported, and deeply connected to the divine intelligence flowing through her. There comes a pivotal moment in the masculine's spiritual journey when the emotional armor he has carried for years, or even lifetimes, begins to crack. This armor, built from past wounds, societal expectations, and unspoken fears, once felt like protection. It kept him safe from disappointment, guarded from vulnerability, and shielded from emotional exposure. But as his soul awakens and the feminine rises into her own alignment, this armor no longer protects him, it restricts him. What once felt like safety now feels like confinement. The masculine begins to sense that the very walls he built to keep pain out have also kept love, connection, and truth from entering. His defenses become heavy, suffocating, and impossible to maintain as the universe gently, but firmly, pulls him toward emotional honesty. In this inner shift, he starts feeling the pull toward vulnerability, something he once resisted or misunderstood. Vulnerability no longer feels like weakness, it feels like freedom. His heart begins to speak louder than his fears, urging him to open, to feel, to be seen without pretense. This pull is not forced by the feminine or by circumstance. It rises from within him, from the part of his soul that remembers what genuine connection feels like. He begins craving authenticity, depth, and emotional transparency. The masculine starts realizing that being guarded has cost him more than he ever gained from the illusion of control. He notices that the moments he allowed himself to open, even briefly, felt more real than the years he spent hiding behind emotional distance. This leads to a profound recognition: the cost of emotional avoidance is far greater than the cost of vulnerability. Avoidance has taken a toll on his relationships, his inner peace, and his own sense of purpose. He sees how avoiding emotions has disconnected him not only from others but from himself. The weight of unsaid feelings, unprocessed wounds, and unspoken truths begins to surface, demanding acknowledgement. As he confronts this inner reckoning, he realizes that emotional avoidance hasn't protected him from pain, it has prolonged it. And now, with increasing clarity, he understands that healing cannot happen without feeling, and connection cannot flourish without openness. As this awakening deepens, he begins seeking depth over distraction. The things that once numbed him, work, habits, surface-level intimacy, or emotional detachment, no longer satisfy. They lack substance, resonance, and meaning. His soul wants more: real conversations, honest connection, emotional truth, and a sense of purpose rooted in authenticity. He no longer desires temporary comfort, he desires alignment. Distractions lose their appeal because they cannot fill the void created by emotional disconnection. The masculine starts craving connection that challenges him, love that expands him, and experiences that make him feel alive rather than safe. This shift does not happen overnight, but its momentum is undeniable. As the feminine stands steady in her sovereignty, her clarity becomes a mirror for his soul. Not because she pressures him to change, but because her evolution awakens his own. The crumbling of his emotional armor is not a collapse, it is a rebirth. It marks the beginning of a new masculine, one who leads with heart rather than fear, who connects through truth rather than defense, and who steps into love with presence rather than avoidance. Through this transformation, he becomes capable of the depth his soul has longed for and the connection both counterparts were destined to experience. There is a profound shift occurring within the awakened feminine, a transformation that redefines how she understands and expresses her power. Instead of reaching outward, pushing, persuading, or trying to control outcomes, she begins learning how to hold power without force. This is not a passive state, it is a deeply intentional one. It is the recognition that true feminine power does not rise from effort but from embodiment. She no longer needs to prove her worth, fight for her place, or convince anyone of her truth. Her presence becomes her influence. Simply by existing in her aligned energy, she begins shaping the world around her. People feel her clarity, sense her boundaries, and respond to her groundedness before she even speaks. Her energy communicates the message her words once struggled to express. I know who I am now. As she awakens further, energetic alignment replaces effort in her life. She no longer chases, overextends, or overstays where her intuition whispers. No. Instead, she lets her vibration do the work on her behalf. She attracts rather than pursues, receives rather than demands, and creates through intention rather than intensity. This is not laziness, it is spiritual precision. She understands that everything meant for her comes through resonance, not through struggle. When her inner world is aligned, her outer world naturally rearranges itself. The relationships that belong in her life flow with ease, opportunities appear without force, and conversations unfold with synchronicity. Effort becomes minimal because alignment becomes everything. In this new embodiment, she begins leading through softness rather than struggle. Softness does not mean weakness, it means emotional intelligence, grounded openness, and unwavering self-trust. She no longer needs to raise her voice, defend her worth, or fight to be understood. Her softness becomes a quiet authority, a frequency that calms chaos, diffuses tension, and invites authenticity from others. She leads through compassion, not control, through intuition, not urgency. Her softness is magnetic because it is rooted in strength. It takes more power to remain soft in a world that demands hardness than it does to armor oneself. Her softness is not a reaction, it is a choice. And in that choice, she becomes a lighthouse instead of a warrior, guiding through light rather than force. This entire evolution culminates in her ability to transform her reality through inner regulation. She learns that her emotional landscape determines her energetic field, and her energetic field determines the direction of her life. Instead of allowing external circumstances to dictate her state, she chooses to regulate her inner world first. When triggered, she breathes into stillness. When uncertain, she returns to intuition. When overwhelmed, she grounds into presence. This mastery allows her to respond rather than react, to choose rather than collapse, to remain centered rather than scattered. In regulating her inner world, she becomes the creator of her outer world. Her emotional consistency becomes the foundation for manifesting relationships, opportunities, and experiences that reflect her healed state. The feminine who learns to hold power without force becomes unstoppable, not because she dominates reality, but because she harmonizes with it. She becomes a woman who shapes energy, influences by presence, and manifests through alignment. Her power is real, palpable, undeniable, and yet beautifully gentle. She leads by being, not by pushing. She transforms by embodying. She rises without fighting. And in doing so, she becomes the highest expression of divine feminine power. There is a powerful and often disorienting stage in the feminine spiritual awakening where old timelines and cycles begin to collapse. This collapse is not destruction, it is liberation. The universe is dissolving everything that no longer resonates with the frequency she is rising into. Outdated relationships, draining connections, and attachments built on fear or dependency begin to fall away. People she once felt deeply connected to may suddenly feel distant, or circumstances that once defined her identity start losing their importance. This dissolving can feel painful at first, but it is a sacred clearing. The feminine is not being abandoned, she is being redirected. Her soul is pruning her life with divine precision, removing anything that cannot travel with her into the next phase of her evolution. As these timelines collapse, habits that once brought her comfort now feel heavy, restrictive, or misaligned. Patterns she used to rely on, emotional coping mechanisms, routines, conversations, or activities, no longer satisfy her spirit. What once numbed or distracted her now exposes what she has outgrown. This discomfort is a sign of growth. The feminine is moving into a higher vibration, and anything rooted in the old frequency begins to feel energetically incompatible. She may feel a sudden desire to change her environment, shift her lifestyle, or detach from old versions of herself. The universe is gently closing doors she once clung to, not to punish her, but to guide her toward a path that honors who she is becoming. During this transition, her internal values begin shifting to match the new frequencies integrating within her. She no longer prioritizes what once seemed important: approval, control, external validation, or superficial clarity. Instead, she becomes guided by deeper values: emotional truth, alignment, peace, reciprocity, intuition, and authenticity. She begins seeing through illusions she once believed. She no longer tolerates inconsistency, dishonesty, or patterns rooted in fear. Her soul becomes her compass, and her heart becomes her teacher. This shift in values is not something she forces. It happens naturally as her consciousness expands. She becomes increasingly aware that every choice she makes either reflects her old self or honors her new self. And with each aligned choice, she strengthens her new frequency. This collapse is ultimately about making space for what aligns with her evolution. The universe cannot place new blessings into hands still holding remnants of the past. The feminine is now clearing emotional and energetic space to receive what she prayed for. The relationships that remain are those that grow with her. The opportunities that appear are those that resonate with her truth. The life emerging is one she once only imagined. This period may feel lonely, but it is sacred loneliness, the quiet before rebirth, the stillness before manifestation, the preparation before alignment becomes visible. The collapse of old timelines is not the end of her story, it is the beginning of her becoming. When the old falls away, it is because the new is ready to enter. When she releases what weighs her down, she rises into the woman she came here to be. And in this rising, everything meant for her begins finding its way, naturally, effortlessly, and in perfect divine timing. There comes a moment in the masculine's spiritual journey when he begins awakening to the loss of the old dynamic between him and the feminine. At first, he may not fully understand what has shifted, but he notices something unmistakable. She is no longer responding the way she once did. The patterns he relied on, her reaching out first, her offering reassurance, her holding emotional space for both of them, have dissolved. Her silence no longer feels like a place of waiting, it feels sovereign. Her energy no longer clings, it stands tall. And for the first time, he feels the absence of her old behaviors not as a relief, but as a loss. This isn't a loss of her presence, it's a loss of the dynamic that once kept him comfortable. He begins to realize that the feminine he knew is not the feminine she has become. As he awakens further, he realizes that her energy has changed shape entirely. She has shifted from longing to alignment, from emotional overextension to emotional sovereignty, from waiting for him to rising for herself. Her energy feels different, cleaner, clearer, lighter. It no longer pours toward him, it emanates from her. She is no longer responding from wounds but from wisdom. And that shift creates a ripple in him that he cannot ignore. He feels her power not as intensity but as presence, and that presence reflects his own inner truth back to him. The old dynamic was built on imbalance, the new one requires accountability, depth, and mutual growth. He recognizes, consciously or unconsciously, that she is no longer willing to carry the emotional weight for both of them. And that realization awakens something raw and undeniable within him. This awakening generates a strange mix of emotions. He feels magnetized toward her but uncertain about how to approach. The attraction is stronger than before, not because she is chasing him, but because she is no longer chasing anything. Her detachment feels sacred, her distance feels intentional, and her inner peace feels magnetic. The more she steps into her power, the more he feels drawn in. But with this magnetism comes uncertainty. His usual strategies, avoidance, distancing, distraction, no longer feel effective or satisfying. He is pulled toward her energy, yet unsure how to meet her at this new level. The masculine now senses that the only path back to her is through authenticity, vulnerability, and emotional truth, qualities he may not yet feel prepared to express. At the core of this transformation is a powerful inner tension. His soul is pulling him where his ego resists. His ego wants comfort, familiarity, and control, the safety of old patterns that required nothing of him. But his soul wants evolution. It urges him toward growth, honesty, and connection rooted in truth rather than fear. This internal battle becomes impossible to ignore. The closer he moves toward alignment, the louder his soul becomes. The more he resists, the more uncomfortable he feels. He begins experiencing emotional waves, intuitive nudges, and synchronicities that push him toward awakening. The loss of the old dynamic is not punishment, it is initiation. It is the universe showing him that the only way forward is through expansion. The masculine awakening is not sudden, it is a gradual uncovering of truth. He is not losing the feminine, he is losing the version of her that enabled his stagnation. And in that loss, he discovers the possibility of becoming a version of himself capable of meeting her in the new dynamic, one built not on imbalance, but on mutual alignment, emotional integrity, and soul-led connection. There comes a sacred turning point in the feminine's spiritual evolution when she no longer needs validation from signs, outcomes, or other people. The external world, which once felt like the compass guiding her through confusion, no longer holds the same power. She no longer checks for synchronicities to confirm alignment, nor does she rely on others to reflect her worth back to her. This shift doesn't happen overnight, it emerges gradually, like dawn breaking inside her soul. She begins realizing that the signs she once sought were always meant to lead her inward, not outward. As she rises into deeper awareness, she discovers that the greatest confirmation she could ever receive comes from her own inner resonance. She believes her truth without needing proof. She trusts her knowing without needing reassurance. This is the divine feminine rising, the moment she becomes her own sign. With this empowerment comes a profound recalibration. she begins trusting her intuition as absolute truth. Intuition stops being a whisper she second-guesses and becomes a voice she honors. Every nudge, sensation, and inner pull feels unmistakably sacred. Her intuition speaks through clarity rather than confusion, through peace rather than urgency. She no longer overrides it for fear, attachment, or doubt because she has witnessed the consequences of betraying it, and the beauty that comes from following it. Her inner voice becomes the guiding force of her life, revealing a path far more aligned than anything she could chase externally. She begins to understand that intuition is not merely guidance, it is divine intelligence flowing through her. As this intuitive trust deepens, she begins feeling complete within herself. She no longer views love, connection, or partnership as the missing piece to her wholeness. She feels full without being filled by anyone else. Her heart is no longer in a state of reaching, it is in a state of being. The fear of abandonment dissolves because she no longer abandons herself. The craving for external affirmation fades because she affirms her own worth through every conscious choice. Her inner world becomes a sanctuary, a place where peace is born from presence, not from external outcomes. In this fullness, she no longer negotiates her standards, lowers her boundaries, or chases what isn't aligned. She becomes rooted, steady, sovereign. From this state of inner completion, she begins attracting from abundance rather than longing. Longing comes from the belief that something outside of her will complete her. Abundance comes from the knowing that she already is complete. This shift changes everything. The connections she attracts become healthier, the opportunities she draws in are more aligned, and the experiences she manifests match her elevated frequency. She no longer magnetizes situations from fear or lack. She draws in what resonates with her light rather than her wounds. She becomes a vibrational match for love that reciprocates, opportunities that uplift, and paths that expand her spiritually. In rising through self-validation, the divine feminine becomes unstoppable, not because she forces reality to conform to her desires, but because she vibrates in harmony with her truth. She becomes a woman who does not wait for signs, but becomes the sign. A woman who does not seek completion, but embodies it. A woman who does not chase love, but emanates it. And through this state of sovereignty, everything meant for her begins flowing toward her naturally, effortlessly, and divinely timed. There is a sacred intelligence woven into the unfolding of every soul connection, and at this stage of the feminine's awakening, the universe is preparing her for a soul-led union, not through force or longing, but through deep emotional alignment. Before a divine partnership can manifest in the physical world, the feminine must first reach a state of emotional stability that no external circumstance can shake. This stability is not about suppressing feelings or pretending to be unaffected. It is about learning to regulate her inner world so fully that she no longer depends on another person's actions, presence, or reassurance to feel secure. The universe is ensuring that when union comes, she enters it from wholeness rather than fear, grounded in her own truth rather than anchored to the unpredictability of another. Her emotional stability becomes the foundation on which the union will rest. This preparation also requires the clearing of all fear-based attachments, those patterns of clinging, overgiving, seeking validation, or losing herself in someone else's energy. Fear-based attachment once felt like love to the wounded feminine, but now she understands that true love cannot coexist with self-abandonment. The universe brings triggers, silence, or distance not to punish her, but to help her release the need for control, certainty, or constant reassurance. These experiences guide her to detach from fear and reconnect with her soul. She learns the difference between attachment and connection, between longing and alignment, between needing someone and choosing them. Each layer of fear she releases strengthens her ability to stand sovereign, allowing love to root itself in freedom, not dependency. As she undergoes this transformation, the masculine is not left untouched. The universe aligns both souls through mirrored growth, even if their journeys appear vastly different on the surface. Every time the feminine elevates her vibration, it activates an energetic response in the masculine. Her evolution challenges him to confront his own patterns, avoidance, emotional shutdown, fear of vulnerability, or resistance to truth. The growth is mirrored not through conversation but through energy. Her stability exposes his instability. Her clarity dissolves his confusion. Her alignment highlights where he has been living out of alignment. This mirroring is not meant to cause pain, it is meant to bring both souls into resonance so they can meet each other equally, consciously, and wholeheartedly. The ultimate purpose behind this preparation is to make the union sustainable, not cyclical. The universe is not bringing them together only to repeat the same wounds, patterns, or separations. It is preparing them for a union rooted in emotional maturity, spiritual understanding, and mutual healing. Cyclical connections are built on unhealed triggers. Soul-led unions are built on evolved consciousness. The feminine is being taught how to hold her frequency, how to remain centered in truth, and how to love without losing herself. The masculine is being guided toward emotional awakening, accountability, and embodiment. The pauses, delays, or distances serve a higher purpose, to ensure that when the reunion occurs, it does not collapse under the weight of old wounds. What is forming now is not a union based on desire alone, but one guided by the soul. A union where both counterparts rise, not one where one carries the other. A union where love expands rather than restricts. A union capable of lasting because it is rooted in truth, alignment, and divine timing. This is the love the feminine has always been meant for, and the universe is preparing her for it with exquisite intention. There is a sacred moment in the feminine's evolution when the lessons of her past stop feeling like wounds and begin transforming into wisdom. This is the phase of true integration, the point where everything she has lived through, every heartbreak, every cycle, every moment of confusion or awakening becomes woven into the fabric of her inner mastery. She no longer fears revisiting the past, because she no longer identifies with it. Instead, she views it with a kind of elevated clarity, recognizing the patterns that once kept her trapped without falling back into them. The triggers that once overwhelmed her now reveal themselves as reminders. The emotional loops that once consumed her now appear as checkpoints. She sees the pattern forming before it reenacts itself, and this awareness alone shifts her trajectory. In this stage, recognition becomes liberation. From this recognition, she begins acting from the wisdom gained through past cycles rather than from instinctual reaction. The woman who once rushed to explain, fix, chase, or soothe now pauses, breathes, and chooses. Her decisions are no longer driven by urgency, fear, or emotional overextension. Instead, they come from grounded awareness and emotional clarity. She remembers how it felt to abandon herself, and so she refuses to do it again. She remembers the exhaustion of overgiving, so she gives only from overflow. She remembers how silence once triggered her wounds, and now she uses silence as a sanctuary. Her behavior no longer emerges from old conditioning but from conscious response. Every choice she makes becomes a reflection of her growth rather than her wounds. This new awareness allows her to rewrite her inner narrative through conscious choice. No longer does she carry the storyline of being the one who waits, longs, or hopes for validation. She begins seeing herself differently, through the lens of her power, not her pain. She rewrites the meaning of her past experiences, transforming moments of heartbreak into reminders of her resilience and lessons of clarity. She stops living from the perspective of, "What happened to me?" and begins living from, "What did this teach me?" Her narrative shifts from victimhood to empowerment, from longing to alignment, from fear to faith. Through this rewriting, she dismantles the internal scripts that once attracted repetitive cycles. She becomes the author, not the character responding to someone else's plot. Through this integration, she finally begins embodying the healed version of herself, not as an idea, not as a future vision, but as her present identity. The healed feminine is not a woman who never feels fear or doubt. She is a woman who refuses to let fear or doubt control her. She walks differently, speaks differently, and loves differently. Her boundaries are steady, her self-worth is unshakable, and her intuition is her guide. She radiates a quiet certainty that comes from knowing she can face any emotional storm and remain centered in her truth. This embodiment becomes magnetic, not because she seeks to attract anything, but because she vibrates from a place of inner harmony. She becomes the version of herself she once prayed to become, not through perfection, but through conscious evolution. In integrating her past into present mastery, the feminine becomes unstoppable. She no longer fears repeating old cycles because she knows she has risen beyond them. She no longer doubts her path because she trusts her inner guidance. She no longer carries her wounds as identity because she has transformed them into wisdom. She is not becoming her higher self, she is embodying her. There comes a moment in the masculine's awakening when he begins to feel the energetic shift in the feminine, not through her words, not through her presence, but through her absence. What once felt like a familiar dynamic suddenly feels foreign. The silence she holds is no longer the same silence he once interpreted as longing, hurt, or waiting. It becomes something else entirely, a mirror. Instead of reflecting his fears, it reflects his truth. Instead of wounding him, it reveals him. For the first time, her silence does not pull him into defensiveness or avoidance, it pulls him into awareness. He begins to see himself through the space she no longer fills. He feels the difference not just emotionally, but energetically, as if her absence has carved out a space he must now step into with honesty and presence. This shift creates an unexpected calling within him, the urge to evolve rather than withdraw. The patterns that once kept him comfortable, distancing, retreating, distracting himself, begin to feel hollow, ineffective, even painful. Something inside him recognizes that the dynamic has changed and that the old version of himself cannot meet the new version of her. Her growth activates a dormant part of his spirit, urging him to rise beyond avoidance and embody a deeper, more truthful version of masculinity. He begins seeking clarity instead of escape, connection instead of control, healing instead of hiding. Her evolution becomes the catalyst for his own because her energy no longer meets him at the level where his wounds felt safe. It calls him higher. As he steps into this awareness, he begins understanding the true emotional gap created by his past avoidance. He feels the consequences of his distance, not as punishment, but as perspective. He sees how each moment he held back created space not for safety, but for separation. He realizes that the feminine did not detach because she stopped caring, she detached because she began caring for herself. The emotional labor she once carried is now back in his hands, asking to be tended to. This realization is confronting, but it is also liberating. He finally sees the cost of withholding affection, vulnerability, or truth, not because she told him, but because he feels it within the emptiness her absence has left behind. In this void, he begins sensing her detachment as a spiritual awakening rather than rejection. Her absence does not feel like abandonment, it feels like alignment. He realizes she has stepped into a higher frequency, one where her energy is no longer entangled with his unhealed patterns. Rather than triggering insecurity, it awakens an inner recognition. She is becoming the version of herself he always admired, respected, and was drawn to, even if he never expressed it. Her detachment feels powerful, sovereign, and self-guided. And instead of pushing him away, it pulls him toward his own evolution. Her rise feels like an invitation, not through demand, but through embodiment. This is the masculine awakening, the moment he feels her shift and realizes the only way to reconnect is to rise into his own truth. He begins understanding that union is not reached through comfort, but through growth, not through avoidance, but through accountability, not through holding her energy, but through elevating his own. Her absence becomes the space where he finally hears his soul calling him home to himself. As both the masculine and feminine deepen into their individual spiritual journeys, a profound process begins beneath the surface, one far more intricate than anything visible in the physical world. This process is energetic harmonization, a sacred recalibration that prepares both counterparts for the next phase of their connection. Even when communication is limited, distance exists, or silence fills the space between them, their emotional fields are synchronizing quietly and powerfully. The feminine's emotional evolution influences the masculine's awakening, and the masculine's internal shifts resonate through the feminine's intuition. Their energies begin aligning in ways they may not consciously understand, yet both can feel the subtle pull, the inner stirrings, the sense that something is shifting. It is the merging of two fields preparing for a new, higher form of connection. During these periods of heightened energy, often amplified during spiritual portals, astrological alignments, or collective shifts, soul contracts begin activating. Soul contracts are agreements made long before physical incarnation, designed to bring two souls together for growth, healing, and mutual expansion. These contracts influence timing, lessons, and the pacing of union. When a portal opens, dormant aspects of these agreements awaken. The feminine feels sudden waves of emotion, intuition, or clarity. The masculine feels unexpected pressure, realizations, or internal disruptions. These sensations are not random. They are the soul contract signaling alignment. The universe orchestrates events, triggers, and synchronicities to guide both counterparts toward the version of themselves capable of sustaining divine connection. What becomes remarkable during this phase is how the masculine and feminine rise in parallel ways, even if their growth appears opposite on the surface. The feminine often leads through emotional mastery, learning to regulate her inner world, trust her intuition, and surrender fear-based attachment. Meanwhile, the masculine rises through accountability, facing his shadows, confronting avoidance, and stepping into emotional truth. Though their paths differ, the intention of their evolution matches. Both are being shaped into more conscious, healed, and aligned versions of themselves. Their timelines begin running closer together, not through effort, but through resonance. The feminine's elevation inspires the masculine's awakening, and his awakening reinforces her commitment to growth. Together, they weave a shared energetic path without forcing physical union prematurely. A crucial part of this harmonization involves clearing karmic residue that once blocked the connection. Karmic residue is the emotional and energetic buildup from past relationships, childhood wounds, ancestral patterns, or previous lifetimes. Both counterparts must clear these layers for union to unfold without repeating old cycles. The feminine clears patterns of overgiving, self-abandonment, and fear of rejection. The masculine clears patterns of avoidance, emotional suppression, and fear of vulnerability. These releases often feel intense, waves of emotion, sudden clarity, unexpected triggers, but they are signs of karmic cleansing. As each counterpart releases these layers, the energetic field between them becomes clearer, lighter, and more receptive to alignment. Energetic harmonization is preparation, not pause. Though nothing may appear to be happening on the surface, everything is shifting internally. The universe is aligning both souls with precision, ensuring that when the next phase begins, it is built on stability, mutual readiness, and spiritual truth. The connection is not waiting, it is evolving. And soon, both counterparts will feel the undeniable pull into a new chapter shaped not by past wounds, but by aligned hearts rising together. And there you have it, the truth behind this Sunday's energetic shift, and why the feminine is being called into her deepest initiation yet. Remember, this isn't about fear, it's about alignment. It's about stepping into the version of yourself your soul has been preparing you for all along. If this message resonated, if you felt something move within you as you listened, then this portal is already working through your energy. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and write, "I am ready for this Sunday." Let the universe see your declaration. Let your energy speak before the moment arrives. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next transmission. There is so much more unfolding, and you are meant to be here for every step of it. Until then, stay grounded, stay open, and trust the timing. This Sunday is not just a day. It's the shift your soul has been waiting for.